Thank you for coming to IAT, to Shapeshifts that are happening as a part of the Bauhaus Centennial and obviously in the context of the Architectural Biennial and Expo Chicago. I will be talking a little bit about the installation here and how it all came together. We will talk about roughly half an hour. We'll leave some time for questions, and then we will walk, those of you that are interested, we will walk together through parts of this installation that connects this building with the Kaplan Institute, where at 5 p.m. is the Bauhaus Ballet that you are all invited to participate. So the Bauhaus handprints were, I came across them like 2 years ago when I was doing research together with Dr. Robin Schuldenfrei at the Moholy-Nagy Foundation in Ann Arbor, Michigan, as a part of our research into the work and legacy of Lucia Moholy, the first wife of László Moholy-Nagy. What we have found there, apart from some of the things that we were really looking for, were these folders with these handprints. There were more or less 3 folders. One had these 13 prints that are here in the circle in the middle. Then there was another folder with usually the second hands to these in black and white, sort of Xerox copies. And then there was a folder of 3 horoscopes that Moholy-Nagy commissioned in 1926 that matched the date found on these handprints. In 1931, that would put it in the last Berlin Bauhaus. And in 1946, horoscope that came to Chicago a week after he died. And we will be able to look at all 3 of them in the Kaplan building. In a way, the Kaplan building that is today the Institute of Design and where the administrative offices of Institute of Design are, I can think about them as sort of the contemporary place of Moholy's office at Institute of Design back in 1946. And that's where these were left. And so there's just a very little factual materials or knowledge that we have about these. We know that they were done in 1926, probably in these last 2 weeks of May, according to the dates on the handprints themselves. We know that they were important enough to Moholy-Nagy to carry them to Chicago, to Institute of Design, and leave them in his office. And we know that they were taken from Institute of Design by Moholy's student and later faculty at the school, Ray Pearson, that took them when he left the school to California, where his son inherited them after his death. And in the mid-90s, he put this set in auction in Sotheby's. And Sotheby's sold half of the set. And that was the second folder that we found, these black and white Xerox copies that Sotheby's was nice to offer to the Moholy-Nagy Foundation as sort of a document that there is the second missing part of it. And so when I saw them for the first time 2 years ago, there were the things that I just told you were what Háčula Moholy-Nagy, Moholy's daughter, who had them in her house and in the archive, told me. And I think what the beginning of my story with them was that I sort of strongly responded to them in contrast to Robin Schuldenfrei, architectural historian, Mies historian, that sort of didn't really see the point in them. And so for the 2 years, I was sort of trying to understand why are they so interesting to me? Why, what are they actually, in the sense of what are these things, why they were made, and how they were possibly made? Who are the people behind them? And in a way, the story is fairly open. We don't really know what these are. Are these handprints or palm prints? Were they made for for palm reading, as, for example, the horoscopes that were found together with them might suggest? But we don't have any evidence that these people were, or Moholy personally was interested in palmistry as such. But we do know that there was spiritual and occult practices at Bauhaus. This whole exhibition or research will be coming out in a month in a book, Ascendance, the Bauhaus handprints, collected by László Moholy-Nagy, that I edited with Robin Schuldenfrei, where we have a couple of additional texts, among them Elizabeth Otto, art historian, that is publishing this month at MIT, book called The Haunted Bauhaus, that sort of brings these practices into light from the better known spiritual and occultistic practice of the first Weimar Bauhaus, when Johannes Itten became almost a guru and a cult leader to some of his students, through what was happening in Dessau, that this is part of it, to question of sex and gender, all the way to what Elizabeth calls the red and brown Bauhaus. And so that gives us a little bit of a perspective where we are, 1926, in the middle of sort of the Bauhaus heydays, right? It's right in the middle. The school is fairly developed in the sense of who is there, what the ideology and what the things that are important for them to teach and to be involved in. But at the same time, what's happening around the Nazism and fascism of the late 20s that sort of pushed them out of Weimar is already bubbling around Dessau. And so one of the things that we might ask is, what was it that they were asking about, in the sense of, thinking about horoscopes or palmistry, how they were thinking about their own futures, that from our perspective today, these are our pasts, that we have actually the knowledge of what happened there. And maybe that brings us a little bit to who are these people, this sort of very strange group of Bauhäusler, the people of Bauhaus, that range from students through teachers to professors and masters, from very known figures like Moholy himself, Vasily Kandinsky, Marcel Brauer, Marian Brandt, but as well less known historical figure that we do have certain information about who they have been, like the photographer Hilde Horn, the ceramicist Thomas Grote, but also people that we have no idea who they were, like probably a couple, or maybe brother and sister, Mina Luhrs and A. Luhrs. So when thinking about who this circle of people is, I think that one way to think about it, that this is a certain social circle of Moholy of that time. Looking at the paper and the colors, the dates, as well as the backside of some of these, that one of the Kandinsky's handprints includes very beautiful sketch on the backside that sort of is clearly Moholy sketch and might suggest that this whole thing might have been happening in the studio of Moholy's master's house, where Kandinsky was just living 2 doors down. That might, for example, explain why we have way more prints from Kandinsky from that day, from May 29th, than from the others. One of these prints of Kandinsky's is right now an exhibition at Centre Pompidou in Paris, part of exhibition on prehistoric art, and it comes from the collection of the museum where it was donated by his wife. There it sort of stays without any context, but it's but what it tells us that he did way more than the others, and that also he took it with him, that there might be way more that we are aware that stayed with Moholy in the folder that eventually made it to Chicago. The stories that are behind these people and the relationships between them or among them are something that sort of is open enough to provide interpretation and different narratives to fill in. And so when I was trying to understand how these are relevant for us today, what was this group of people, I thought it maybe as an artist and educator, as somebody who's teaching and working with students here in Chicago, but also elsewhere as I'm exhibiting, traveling, doing workshops around the world. And I realized that maybe part of the answer to why these might be so touching or so interesting to me as an artist might lie with this similar cohort of people coming maybe from art schools, which led me in a little bit by chance and a little bit by letting the time to do its own, to realize that this May I was invited to do 2 workshops abroad, one in Italy and one in Czech Republic, that they both fell on the same dates that these were created. As was the end of the semester here at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where I was finishing my grad seminar, working with students over the spring semester, and I thought that maybe that could be a way to connect and create these 3 groups of students that might find their interpretation to these within their own practice as contemporary students, graduates, artists that are starting their own way, or us as educators. And so what I did in these 2 weeks in May, I conducted these 3 sessions that 2 of them led to workshops, and worked with these prints into them. That maybe is also a little bit, could be a good time to mention the way how these were made and remade. When I sort of realized that I would want to show them and to bring them out of the collection, László Moholy-Nagy, Moholy's daughter, that I've been collaborating over the years on a couple of projects, was a little bit afraid because they are very fragile, and after all they are sort of historical objects. And so she suggested that maybe I could come to an arbor and to scan them high resolution and work with them through what we together call the production-reproduction process that is so crucial to understanding of Moholy's practice. And I felt like that it's really clever not just because of historical preservation, not just because of what it allows, would it allow me to do with them in a process, but also really in a sense of what are these handprints and how Moholy himself might have related to them. And therefore part of the question why they were created and why they were interesting to him enough to carry them all the way to Chicago. And so if we think about handprint or this act that is so embedded in our both just human experience, but certainly artistic experience, right? The mark making of a hand on a stone, if it's an imprint or if it's sort of this blowing up and creating a negative space, right, that we can find in the caves dating thousands and thousands of years back. The place of a handprint was always understood as something very unique, right, like as some type of a signature. Certainly at the beginning of the 20th century, where we already know that handprint, palm print, fingerprint are unique to each of us. And so when Moholy in 1922, 4 years prior to that, together with Lucia Moholy, is writing Production, Reproduction, the Potentialities of a Phonograph, he is concerned in what's happening at these times with art making in a time of reproduction, right? There were all of these apparatuses, as he calls them, around him that were made for reproduction. Cameras, photographic paper, gramophones, radio, and the place of the unique and of the original were sort of placed into a question as in general, right? And in the seminal texts from 1922, Moholy argues for a use of these apparatuses like gramophone for creative purposes. And together with his wife, they're sort of breaking it down and instructing us, the artists, how to work with these apparatuses to use them for creative, unique works of art. And that's how conceptually, at least, for example, photogram was born, right? The understanding that what they were doing, what they were playing with the light-sensitive material and putting their hands and later their faces on and printing themselves onto it as these unique objects that photograms are directly implementation of these theories. So what does it mean to make these handprints and why to do them? Moholy himself saw himself all the way to the end as a painter, primarily, and the place of a hand is really interesting throughout his career, right? As from the painting and drawing, the traditional place of a hand in art making or mark making, through his engagement with technology, with these apparatuses, all the way to creating the series that is known today as the telephone paintings, when he ordered animal works over the phone, taking his hand completely out of the process, right? And so this idea of production, of reproduction, of these as such, was probably another thing that was interesting to me. And when I scanned them, I suddenly could reprint them as many times as I would want to. And so that was the first sort of step into these collaborative sessions with these groups of students. So I reprinted them and brought them and offered them these 13 people for them to connect. Some of the students are here. And so they each picked one of the 13 Bauhäusler according to, you can ask them later why they picked Kandinsky or why they picked Marianne Brandt. And what we did together, that they printed themselves, their handprint, sort of to touch the person that they found. And that's the second circle that you see around. I took these prints then, we did that on May 11, then I flew to Italy to do a master workshop at the Grad School of Photography in Modena, where I offered the students, again, the set of prints that was already with the yellow imprints from Chicago, and the Italian students imprinted themselves with blue color on top of them. And so that was already not just the Bauhaus person, but also the Chicago students that were touched and connected with. And from there I took it to Czech Republic for the third workshop that printed themselves in white on top of them. And so that's these that you are seeing around. Part of, I initially, to be honest, when we made them, I really thought about it as a gesture, as a way of connecting. I didn't really think that they would be interesting visually the way that I found them now, that they're sometimes more interesting than the originals. So there were two things that happened with that. One was that there was this new image, and the other was that it was this new original, right? This idea of production and reproduction. I brought this reproduction, and suddenly here we had these new original works of art with acrylic paint on it. As a part of the session, what I did, that I printed the Sotheby's black and white prints as well. I sort of cleaned them and created these very simple black and white prints that I then offered to the students as a gift. I printed them on a sort of nice, heavy paper, and these prints that were usually the second hand of that artist. So if somebody picked Kandinsky's left hand, the black and white print was of the right hand. And that served as a platform for these contemporary artists to create a new work of art. And so they did, and they did only in a digital way. They sort of each of them sent me an email, a file that was the same size as these, and it will be part of the publication that is coming out as sort of the true artistic interpretations of these. So that's what happened within these workshops, and at the same time, I understood that the display of these could work very differently if they would be presented in a space that is not necessarily as an architecture recognized as a white cube, but a place that might have spiritual relationship. I guess one of the reasons that I did that, because I did have this experience a couple of years ago working in Germany in Kunsthalle Osnabrück, which is a Kunsthalle placed in a Gothic cathedral. And I thought that it could be interesting to see what happens to these when they are presented in this environment. And so the exhibition with these opened in Germany at the end of August. But as I was sort of preparing the project for Germany, through shapeshifts, Bauhaus, you know, the Chicago way things are working, I suddenly found myself here at IIT talking with the Dean of Institute of Design, Dennis Weil, that suggested, well, maybe you should show them in the God box. And that was surprising. I didn't really know about this place, even though exactly 10 years ago I worked together with Justine here on a project at the Crown Hall, also led by very similar ideas of Moholy education principles within the Mies environment. And so I was really excited to be able to work again with such a space within this on this campus, and so when I came here after coming back from Germany, having the show installed there were a couple of things that happened as I sort of re-entered the space. First of all, it was way smaller than when I left in June after the Gothic cathedral. Because I was with the same number of pedestals here. And so a couple of the ideas that I had and that I implemented in Germany that included these Sen drawings just wouldn't work here. And so there were a couple of things that I was interested in doing so. One was finding a way to be in additional dialogue with people that are the owners of both this space as a space of worship, but primarily students from Institute of Design. And I so worked here with Jason and Adi sitting over there, that not just that helped put together physically these pedestals, but there's this third set of pedestals that you might seen outside, and then we will follow on our way to Kaplan. And in the creative dialogue with Adi and Jason, we tried to think how is this relevant, or how does it fit into the overall concept of the campus? And there were some things that were already happening to me as I was working with the building itself, and with the days spent here understanding how does it work, or how it doesn't work at times, and through that going to the rest of the campus. So a couple of the things that I was able to do here, apart from sort of cleaning the space from mostly chairs and pianos that are here for the religious groups that are using this space, but also clearing the two rooms that we entered from that are usually sort of filled with musical instruments and not accessible. Which suddenly, and sort of realizing the architecture in them, and also the, obviously responding to the frosted glass on the back that I was so familiar from Crown Hall 10 years ago. And that led me to think about sort of switching the entrances and turning the chapel towards the campus. There is something really strange with this facade that is, on one hand, is facing the Michigan Avenue out of all the avenues, but at the same time, it's really this place of nobody out here, and the campus is over there. There was also, when I was talking to one of the to a couple of the people from the religious groups and asking them how it is to use this space for worship, one of the things that seemed like didn't really work for them is this clear facade and this idea of praying in front of everybody that is going from the student center to the parking lot and back and forth. And so then the idea of implementing these prints as vinyls on the facade started to resonate even more so. I did come with this idea already because in Germany there's a large glass door that you have to go through. That's where I first implemented this idea of a vinyl that during the day when the sun is lighting in is projecting these lines in, and at night when the interior is lit up, it sort of functions as a light box towards outside. When coming here, and in Germany it's just one print of Moholy's palm. When I came here and I realized that there are 13 planes on this facade, so then I obviously took all 13 of them. And what happened as they were coming together in my Photoshop sketch, I started to realize that these palm prints are resonating on a different level with Mies than it did, for example, with with the Gothic architecture in Osnabrück. Both on a level of closing this and creating almost like one of these Miesian marble, or we have here the granite, right? The organic part of the Miesian architecture. And the other thing that that felt like starts to resonate is the nature outside and the organic impact that Caldwell was working with Mies here on the campus, figuring out how the trees are functioning in relationship to all the glass that was put out here. And so that's how this came together, how the flip in the entrances happened, and then starting to think, and it was obviously possible because everything is symmetrical, right? As is the campus. And that was something that Adi and Jason came with when we were thinking, okay, how do we use the third set of these details to connect it to the rest of the campus. In Germany, I sort of created another circle throughout the entire Kunsthalle, connecting all the rest of the spaces. And what Adi and Jason came up with, sort of creating this almost like a half circle that is cutting through the campus between Carr and Kaplan, avoiding this direct relationship that if we would just walk directly, we would have to pass sort of the back of the garbage trucks and parking lot and crossing places that are not supposed to be crossed. And so Jason and Ade are leading us and talking about the double symmetricity within the campus, right? The 31st Street as the top of it, where it meets the open space in front of a Crown Hall, and then through the spaces between the libraries, sort of bends back to Kaplan. So I hope that you can join us to walk this walk through. We can also, use it to talk. You can talk to both Katie and Effie here that participated in the workshop, to Adi and Jason that participated in the last efforts here. You can talk to me if you have any questions, and I hope that you will enjoy the Bauhaus Ballet at Kaplan. Thank you.